And she said, Emma Anderson of the band's beginning, we were kind of punk rock in one way. We did think, well, if they can do it, why the fuck can't we? And basically, our idea was to have extremely loud guitars with much weaker vocals. And really, the vocals were weaker due to nervousness. We'd always be going, turn them down, turn them down.
Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever time of the day it is in your part of the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. I'm Andy, that is John over there, and we get together and we share and discuss music. And today, John is going to be offering up something for me to go off and listen to. I will come back and give my best attempt to tell you what I thought and made of it all. But in order for us to get underway, I'm going to need to know the band and the track, John.
Okay, so band is Lush. I think we've talked about them before.
We have, and
I
I've
don't
and
think
I,
you're
and I had
familiar.
heard I had heard of them. It's another one of those situations, right? Where
Yeah, yeah.
for me, the name screams early '90s, and they were on my periphery, but not in my foreground or whatever. You know what I mean? So like, I didn't really, I don't recall having listened to any of their materials. I just knew that they existed and maybe toured with some bands at some point that I was familiar with or something. But that's about the extent of it.
Cool. All right, well, now's your chance. The track is Nothing Natural.
Okay, well. I've got everything I need and asked for. I will go off, give it a listen, and come back and let y'all know what I think.
Bonne chance, Marie.
Mm. All right. I think I've got a good enough taste for this to kind of let you know where I stand at this point. Yeah, it opens up immediately. We're off to the races pretty much here. Quickly strummed, kind of dark, slightly dark, chord progression. That has just a touch of this kind of jangliness to it. There's this affectation on the guitar. I'm not really sure what it is thus far, but it almost has this chorusy, uh, reverby cut kind of sound to it, which makes sense and it sounds good. There is this super simple bass line and drum pattern beneath that. But I that bass line is just drilling into your head, dun, 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 sort of like, and it's just always there. So yeah, that's a bit of an earworm for me already. Her voice, I really love this airy, ethereal voice that matches the music as well. Um, but there's almost this. I don't know if this is a product of how it was produced, or if this is just her kind of delivery. But it almost has this air of like trepidation to it. Now, if that's a product of it being produced, then maybe it's just the levels are low, and that's what's giving it that kind of sound. But it's not super easy to pick up what she's saying, though I did hear her say, like, before I met you, I was blind, like something about pills and liquids filled her mind. Um, so I'm picking up some of the stuff, and those are interesting lyrics. But there's something about her delivery that's kind of interesting to me. Not really sure what it is, but just my first, you know, feeling at a glance, or whatever the auditory form is of at a glance, at a quick listen. Uh, but yeah, I it's got this kind of, her ethereal voice kind of adds to this dream poppy kind of nature to it as well. So let's see where they go from here. Oh, I like that. Whatever that sound is, I guess maybe it's coming from one of the guitars, but that sound, enjoyable. Kind of caught me off guard there. The more I'm listening to this definitely does have shades of dream pop to it, but there's also this kind of, I guess because it's a lot of this is really leaning on the guitar sounds, despite that bass that is just ever present. It has a bit of a shoegazy quality to it, or shoegaze light. Not to make it sound like I'm looking down my nose. It doesn't have to be shoegaze at all for me to find it enjoyable. It just sounds like, I don't know, maybe because it sounds like there's less twisting and knob fiddling and things. It's just a really good guitar tone in a song that's clearly driven by the guitars, that kind of gives it this shoegazy quality to it. It's nice. Okay. Mm. Yeah. So the first bit of that song, and my initial interpretation of it, um, the feeling was more of like looking to the skies, dreamy, ethereal, sound of her vocals, all of that played into why I felt more dream poppy aspects of it. Now, as the song progressed, shortly after I made a note of, it's kind of shoegaze light, it then, of course, karma got me. And it started to, instead of looking at the skies and this dreamy ethereal nature, it started to firmly look down at the shoes. Uh, it developed far more into a shoegaze type song as it progressed. I loved the whirring of whatever that guitar sound that was. Lovely. Um, the like little lead motif was really nice as well. Those hand drums after the part where it cuts out to like just that guitar and then everything kind of comes back in and and you sort of hear these hand drums and really it was nice and unexpected. For me it was I I'm not saying I like shoegaze more than dream pop or dream pop more than shoegaze, though I probably like shoegaze more than dream pop. Um, the second half of the song really shined for me and kind of brought me back in a little bit. Now I wasn't completely bowled over by this, but there were definitely enough really interesting aspects and attributes to the song that I would want to hear more from this band. Um, she's got this mysterious nature to her voice that is this like airy, hard to discern at times delivery that actually lends itself to the sound of the music. That bass line was probably the earwormiest bit of this song, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it was just constant. Even when it stopped and it came back in pretty much doing the same thing. So take that for what it is. They're an interesting band, and this was a good enough sounding song that it would lead me to want to check out more by them. Um, yeah, and it definitely, like I said, it definitely shined in the second half more than it did in the first. But it's not like I didn't enjoy the first half. It's just I really liked the second half more. Yeah, interesting listen. I think I've as I mentioned earlier to John, I've heard of Lush. Um, they were around when I was starting to get into music, but they were more in my periphery than uh, in the foreground. So yeah, I'm sure John can help fill in some gaps and let me know more about them. So with that understood, let's get back to them.
Danny DeVito is back. So you've listened to Nothing Natural by Lush. What were your findings?
Danny DeVito. Um, it was this was an interesting listen. It was like not in a like a really starkly contrasted way, but in a way, it was kind of like a tale of two parts or two halves for me. Um, and that not just from a level of I don't want to say enjoyment, so it like suggests that I didn't like one and I enjoyed another half, but level of enjoyment and um also sort of from my ears upon first listen, sort of a genre split at one point in the song. Um, it it opens up with this quickly strummed, slightly dark chord progression on the guitars that has more than just a touch of jangle and affectation to it. Um, and beneath that, there is this simple but driving and insistent bass line that is coupled with similarly a shuffly but similarly insistent drum beat as well that kind of keeps the pace of the song. And the singer begins delivering the first verse, and she has this airiness to her vocals, which does sound really great, but perhaps to the detriment of her enunciation. Because I couldn't it wasn't super clear to me. And oftentimes I chalk this up to accents or something like that, but I don't think that's the case this time. I think it's there there's something about the way this is either produced or her delivery that kind of adds to this. And I don't know if it's like if it's a production choice, that's what it is, and there's nothing that can be further explained. But if it's a her thing, then I would describe it as almost this sense of I don't know, trepidation or something like that. Or maybe a slight um in my estimation, from just one listen, unearned lack of confidence, because she shouldn't lack confidence. It sounds good, but it sounds like she does because of her voice. So okay, you're pointing as if am I on to something here?
I would say it's without. I'll go into it, but it's all of the things you said.
Oh, okay. Well then, feel good about myself to this point. So uh, I catch a bit of I do catch a bit of what she's saying at points, and one particular line very early on stood out to me, where before I met you, I was blind, pills and liquor or liquid filled my mind. Um, Interesting. Kind of showing you where she was before the subject of the song came into her life. Um, there's a little bit of a shift as well, because she says well, not just yet, but she says that something to the effect of don't you know that you're beautiful. And I assume that this is the chorus or refrain, since it's repeated, I think, throughout the song. And then interestingly enough, later she delivers a line, you were only beautiful, which sounds like like the thing that she coveted so much earlier in the song is the only redeeming quality of this person that she's now addressing as the song progresses, which is interesting because it kind of diminishes the one quality about the person or thing that stood out to her um, as she goes through the song. And I'm wondering what I missed in between that would connote a diminishing of the relationship or her view of this person.
I hadn't thought about it, but it reminds me of the Love and Rockets lyric where he goes something about beauty is only skin deep, and then the next line, but if I'm honest, that's all I really need. Which I think is a great lyric. Yeah, there you go.
Funny. So, at the 2:05 mark, I get this rush of whirring and like guitar sound that floods one of the speakers. And this would continue to fade in and out as the song kind of progressed. And now, instead of having this looking to the heavens, dreamy, ethereal, dream pop quality to the song, it's now beginning to change into more of a shoegazy sound. And instead of looking up at the skies, you're looking down at the shoes and the pedals and the things that can, make sounds and manipulate sounds. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So that was kind of what I was trying to explain with this dichotomy of some point in the song it changing from just overtly dream pop to me to more shoegazy in its own right. And the sound then almost takes on this wavering or shuddering effect that is almost akin to like what a turntable does with manipulating the forward or backward motion of sound, like this kind of, like, I don't know, like I said, shuddering, wavering kind of sound to the music or the guitar sound in this point. And then that sort of introduces this really mysterious lead guitar melody that kind of cries over the top of the musical canvas. And I have to say that the last 35 seconds from the introduction of that whirring guitar all the way up until the end of this lead has shades of The Cure to me. Choices and sound manipulations that, like, that kind of wavering, shuddering sound is something I've definitely heard in a Cure song before. And even that lead has this melancholic sort of air to it that I've also heard in Cure songs before as well. So needless to say, I loved the shit out of that part because I love the Cure. Also, it's at this point that I feel the need to recognize the use of layered vocals, which I wasn't underscoring before when I was talking about the vocals. I was sort of just talking about her and her lyrics, but now, and even before this, I was picking up on what to me sounds like a different female vocalist. It doesn't sound like a case of, oh, this is the same voice laid on top of an already existing iteration of that voice. So they pair really well together, and it sounds great, and it kind of only further fortifies that ethereal nature to the vocals in this song. Around the 3:43 marker, we get a change of pace with all of the instruments kind of cutting out, save for the guitars, who continue to churn out these affected sounding chords on the guitar. I don't know if it's like reverb or if it's like a chorus or a light flange or something, but there's something happening with these guitars, and it's very much of that genre and period of time. You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah,
well into that period of time. These folks weren't breaking ground on it, but they were definitely taking a page out of the book that had already been sort of written at this point on guitar sound and rock and roll. Um, so yeah, that continues for a bit. Then the vocalist joins back in with some da 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 da's. The vocalizing that that she does there, or that they do perhaps. Um, Before the rest of the band kind of rejoins, but this time with what sounds like a new member that they picked up along the way, in the form of a hand drummer or a like auxiliary percussionist who kind of joins in, because I start to hear the sounds of like hand drums coming through, which is a nice addition that I didn't expect to hear. So I enjoyed that as well. By the 4:38 mark, the vocalizing ceases and the music kind of carries us for another minute plus of just jamming out before it hits a fade, and then that carries us to that 5:55 end point in the song. Now the track didn't like blow me away or bowl me over, though there were so many aspects of it that made me want to give them and songs by them another go, and to see what else their sound is like. If this is a good representation of it, then there's potential for me to like even more perhaps some of their other tracks. But I did enjoy this, even if I didn't find it like earth shattering or groundbreaking. They have, like I said, elements of genres that I typically enjoy, this sort of ethereal dream pop quality, as well as this guitar and guitar sound driven shoegaze sound. The music was fairly simple, but they did an excellent job of creating groove that I know you like you've said before. You can give you 5 straight minutes of just the same thing. If it's a good groove, you'll fall into it. They relied not solely on that, but a lot of this song was relying on the groove that they had created early on. And I think and I should say that great choices with effects and dynamics throughout as well, to give everything kind of like an evergreen freshness, and didn't kept things from getting stale. And for me, this probably comes as no surprise, but the bass was the most earwormy part of this song. If I were to find myself repeating any bit of this tune to myself in the future, it would come in the form of me humming along to that, because it was just that. I mean, and it rarely changed. Now I don't know if that means in fact, I know it doesn't mean, oh, I loved the bass in this. It's just it was so goddamn insistent, like that
yeah.
you'd recognize it, that it's hard to avoid, and that's what drilled its way into my head. Um, so yeah, I also liked the vocalist airy delivery, like I mentioned before, even if it had a tinge of, as I've said, trepidation to it. Um, and yeah, I would love to give this band another go in the future, perhaps if there's other tracks worth listening. I'll let you be the determiner of that. But yeah, I thought it was a nice kind of meshing of two genres that are kind of like sister genres, or not that far off as far as timeline and and all that good stuff. But yeah, I would be interested to hear more about the band, this tune, whose lyrics that I caught were kind of evocative, but I don't know if there's more of a story that you can kind of illustrate behind it. If so, I'd be happy to hear that. But yeah, it was very much an enjoyable listen, John.
Cool, cool. This is one of those times where I am actually interested to hear what your point of view as someone who doesn't, comes at it cold, as it were, and from another continent. Um, it's just really interesting to hear, and I don't know. Sometimes I think I listen to this and I think it's just the most angelic and wonderful thing, and other times I could imagine finding it quite slightly annoying. Um, but I've said that I absolutely adored it when it came out. So let's get into the bits about the band, and there's little bits and pieces which will make little cogs twirl in your head, and oh, that makes sense. So
Okay.
the band was formed in 1987 in London, and they were one of the first bands, probably the second or third band, to be tagged with the description shoegaze.
Oh,
Um, yeah, Moose we've established was the first, and I think they were like second or third. So personnel: Mickey Berenyi on vocals and guitar, Emma Anderson guitar and vocals, Steve Rippon bass, and Chris Ackland drums. So Berenyi and Anderson knew each other from school. So initially they were sort of they've both been bassists in other bands very briefly and flitted around, and they joined together a band called the Baby Machines. And then Rippon joined the band, and they decided to change their name to Lush, and actually made their live debut in March '88. So the Baby Machines name came from a line in the Susie and the Banshees song Arabian Nights, and their influences were garage rock, Cocteau Twins, My Bloody Valentine, Susie and the Banshees, Beach Boys, and the Birds. Um, so Emma Anderson said of the band's sorry.
well, just a question for a point of clarification. You had said you had gone on about how they're a bit of a pioneer in the world of shoegaze, but that one of their My Bloody Valentine, I would have put in that list of pioneers for shoegaze as well. Maybe you can clear up some stuff. How can they be pioneers if someone who influenced their sound was also in that genre, or did they not get labeled that until later?
Because Emma Anderson was going out with Kevin Shields at the time. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, so of
Okay, so
course
they
they
were
would
kind of
influence each other.
contemporaries. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, and she said, Emma Anderson of the band's beginning, we were kind of punk rock in one way. We did think, well, if they can do it, why the fuck can't we? And basically, our idea was to have extremely loud guitars with much weaker vocals. And really, the vocals were weaker due to nervousness. We'd always be going, turn them down, turn them down. So that was their idea. And it's quite a common, we've talked about this. It started with the wishy-washy indie and then it went into shoegaze where the vocals became less and less prominent and more of a sort of sound, you know. Um, yeah. So in 89, they signed to 4AD, one of the fantastic record labels, and their first recording, Scar, which was a six-track mini album, huge critical praise. Um, and they were really sort of packing them in live around the London circuit in particular. So they were one of the most written about bands of the late 80s, early 90s indie scene. Long after, they were tagged with a shoegazing label as that started to swell. It's some movement. And then the following year, they brought out EPs Mad Love, which was produced by Robin Guthrie of Cocteau Twins, and also the EP Sweetness and Light, produced by Tim Freescreen of Talk Talk. It's the bands we have.
Yes.
So that Scar and then these other two EPs will join together and it became Gala, a compilation album, which is like unanimous acclaim from all the critics. So this track you heard was written by Emma Anderson. So her and Mickey would sort of do stuff separately all together, but they really were the two songwriters. Um, so yeah, it opens the Black Spring EP, which is that there, which came out in October '91. And the track also appears on Lush's first full-length album of new material, effectively their debut album, as opposed to the compilation called Spooky, which came out in January '92. I had it on. It's one of the first albums I think I got on CD actually. But I have it on vinyl, but it's a like a special edition 10-inch, so it doesn't fit in the frame. But yeah, so this is really nice, two disc, and it's all this sort of design stuff. And actually, there, I think I will just grab it. Is it around here somewhere? Yes, it is. Yeah, these are just the two EPs that I mentioned. Mad Love. It's a bit shiny. You see, they have a kind of common design theme. This is Sweetness and Light. Again, you can see that sort of really nice. Oh, and this is For Love as well, which is another EP off the Spooky album. So yeah, quite nice visually as well.
Yeah.
Um, very, very similar. So yeah, so Spooky came out. Again, the whole album was produced by Guthrie, and Spooky featured very similar sound to Cocteau Twins with these walls of sound and the shed load of guitar effects. The reviews were mixed, and they were mixed because many people in the music press criticized Guthrie's production, saying that it sort of not whitewashed their sound, but sort of made it just too much Cocteau's Twins light. But it has quite a popular appeal. And for an indie band on 4AD, it got to number 7 in the mainstream UK charts, which is like pretty good. Um, the Black Spring EP got to number 2 in the UK indie charts, and then they released this song just as a separate sort of standalone single, and it got to number 43 in the mainstream charts. Um, and they then supported the releases with a UK tour, and during that tour, the bass player Rippon, he left and was replaced by Phil King. So they were described as sort of space age guitar pop, and Alison and Berriini's wistful hippie harmonies. It says the songs on Black Spring were marked by unconventional and constantly changing time signatures developed by Anderson and drummer Chris Ackland. Anderson and Berriini both used a vast amount of chorus effect on the guitars, because I know you like to know these things, as well as other distortion, overdrive, and delay effects. So just as much as you can get. And I think within that song, there's bits where the guitars come in and there's sort of different sounds, these layers, and that's where it's most effective after a chorus, and then you get that guitar in the right chunk and that's really nice. There are nice touches there.
Yeah,
So
as the song
yeah,
progressed, I really, and it sort of shifted to that shoegazy thing that I said.
yeah.
That's when the guitars really started to take over for me and really command my attention. I loved the production choices of panning in and out of certain speakers and things like that. So yeah, there's some really good choices made in the guitar production on this.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them live about 3, 4 times within that space of a couple of years. There's footage of them at the Junction on a TV show, short-lived, called Up the Junction, which had bands, and I'm in the crowd of that. And
Oh,
but
nice.
yeah, I also saw, and that was more of like because it was for a TV show, it was a bit sort of upbeat. I saw them again, and they had really severe lighting. There was just these wedges of purple sort of light coming out from the monitors and the speakers, and they will kind of step into them as they play. So you just get their face and bits of the guitar lit up,
Like
and the rest was in
silhouettes
darkness.
and
Yeah,
shadows.
really, really pretty, really beautiful. And that's when you kind of really appreciate those, ethereal, gentle qualities within that setting. But then when you're in a mosh pit, you want the guitars and all that crap. Anyway, in 2016, Pitchfork ranked Spooky at number 27 on its list of 50 best shoegaze albums of all time. And really oddly, they're a fairly decent sort of write-up. They said, unlike other rock records of the early 90s, Spooky doesn't rely on blistering noise to make its points. Its brilliant intricacies remain best appreciated alone, through headphones, and preferably in a room where long shadows creep onto the walls. Each element in the mix, from the caffeinated bass lines in For Love to the reverberated guitars in Fantasy, is layered on thickly yet proportionately. Its lyrical themes, which range from hazy dreams to long lost friends, are helmed adroitly by co-vocalists and guitarists Emma Anderson and Mickey Berenier. Together, they set a template for the kind of wistful musings that shoegaze became known for. Their incantations are only frightening in how wonderful they are. And to quote Withnail and I, even a stop clock gives the right time twice a day. So well done, Pitchfork. So yeah, onto the lyrics, which I've listened to this song since 1991, and I never knew the bloody words. They were noises to me. So it was quite nice to learn them. Before I met you, I was blind. Pills and liquid filled my mind. Beneath your outline, I was new, overflowing with your tune. And don't you know you're beautiful? Next month, I missed you like a child. Couldn't see past you, though I tried. And don't you know you're beautiful? And don't you know you're beautiful? It was interesting you said about the two sort of halves or whatever, or parts of this song. The next bit, even the way she sings and the scanning of the lines is different. So now I think of every hour when you still retain the power and the precious nights we'd share when we breathed in common air. The feeling now you're gone, this wretched life goes on. the knife inside of me, it turns just like a key.
Mm.
And then sort of that tune though of the chorusy bit, the sunlight always comes too soon. My body asked me what to do. I was so small and vulnerable, and you were only beautiful. Instrumental break, as you said, comes back in. The season's shining in your hair, and it was more than I could bear. And I could see you in my smile, and you are only beautiful. Getting that breakdown, build back up vocalization, which I actually thought for many years was singing something that I was destined never to understand. But it is da 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 da, and then the outro. Now, clearly, it's about this relationship, and we've spoken about this beauty skin deep and all this other stuff. But interestingly, give you a quote. The classics here among you may recognize. I might call him a thing divine, for nothing natural I ever saw so noble. The Tempest, Act One, Scene Two, where Miranda comes across a shipwrecked Ferdinand for the first time. So it's interesting because in 19, and I know both ladies were pretty well read as well. So Nothing Natural is also the 1986 debut novel by Jenny Diski. If now, stop me if this sounds familiar. This follows a young woman who enters into a sadomasochistic relationship with a charming and domineering man.
Mm.
The book, perceived as S&M by The New Yorker, received some backlash upon its release. This is 1986, as critic Anthony Thwaite criticized it as being the most revolting book I've ever read. Recent D.H. Lawrence. The feminist magazine Sister Right chose to ban Diski from publishing with them. How amazing is it that like the public sensation like so many years ago was, 50 Shades of Grey,
I was
which
just gonna
sounds
say this
exactly the
sounds
same
like
fucking thing.
49 Shades of Grey, like its
Yeah,
predecessor.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That the attitude shifted in the space of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
25 years or whatever. And it might be that influenced the sort of dynamics of relationship in terms of the lyrics. I don't know. But it's quite an interesting thing, to note. Perhaps I never read it or even heard of The Tempest either. But it's interesting. As a title, Nothing Natural is quite evocative, and to take it from that, it's got to be from something. Anyway, to continue the story, after Spooky, the band were personally requested by Perry Farrell to join the Lollapalooza roster in '92. So they obviously went on their little
This is probably when they
gamble.
came on my radar and I started to hear
Yeah.
about them. Yeah.
So then they produced the next album, Split, was released in '94. It got to 19 in the UK, wasn't as good, well received as Spooky. Then their fourth album, 1996, Love Life, saw a change in their approach with less guitar effects and sounding really more Britpop. And even their vocals were very more straightforward and not so ethereal at all. It was their most successful album with two singles, Single Girl and 50 brackets, Shake Baby Shake in brackets. Both got to the number 21 spot in the singles charts. So a joint highest for the band. And the other single got to number 22 or 23. So they're very consistent. Um, so in 1980, in 1996, after this album was released, they toured heavily, and it was quite a tiring and fractious tour. And Emma Anderson announced her desire to quit the band. 2 days after that, on the 17th of October, the drummer Chris Ackland was found dead in his parents' garden. He had hung himself. Um, and that's about as much explanation as you get as to what happened or why he did it. I don't think the two were related. It's just the timing.
Yeah.
So after a period of mourning, quite an extended period of mourning, Lush disbanded in February 1998 officially, but obviously they had never played after that, October. Um, Lush did reform in 2015. I was really surprised when that happened. And they had the addition of Justin Welsh from Elastica, who was an old friend of Ackland's on drums. So it was quite nice that his mate replaced him. On Facebook, the band posted, "We wish it could have been sooner, but for many years it was just too painful to contemplate without Chris. And then all kinds of life-changing commitments made it impossible. Now at last, the three of us are in the right place at the right time to play music again." So they toured and they released an EP of new material called Blind Spot in 2016, which is, decent. It was all right. And then in November that year, they announced the band was split. And they said, again on Facebook, it's been wonderful to revisit our old music and create new material. However, it's now time for us to return to our families and homes and bring our time together as a band to a close. So yeah, it's quite nice. It's like this image of them going back to the Shire or whatever,
What I was thinking of, like, The Hobbit for some reason. Like, eventually all adventures come to an end and you must go home and settle down.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was thinking of Bilbo. That's so weird that you went with there with that.
So
But it's also nice that they get to kind of like control their fate and
yes,
put the punctuation at the end of the story on their own terms instead of leaving it in a sad kind of
yeah.
fashion. The drummer passing away and all that stuff.
Or
Yeah,
doing an endless sort of greatest hits tour that you just do the same
yeah,
songs again and again for the next 10 years. Yeah,
yeah,
so um I mean the two ladies are very interesting characters anyway. I can't quite remember what is doing, but Mickey, I mean she was a journalist for a while, she did all sorts of stuff. Since their sort of reformation then split that sort of 2 year period, she has formed another a band called Patrisco. I should have written this down. And I've heard it. It's all right. It's interesting. She's got a very interesting sort of heritage. Definitely Japanese. I think like Hungarian or something as well. So there's a real sort of mixture in there, which influences some of her music. And you see her, when she's interviewed and stuff, she's really smart cookie and very sort of engaging and charismatic. So yeah, interesting band. It's just that sound, I think, was the sort of particularly this does sound like Cocteau Twins, but it's that development, as you say, that the dream pop, which was, developed really by Cocteau Twins, sort of 8 years before, more than that before this, and then you mix in the musings of Jesus and Mary Chain and their sort of experimentations with noise, and you get this shoegaze effect coming through. And shoegaze, as we've spoken about before, is like a different definition UK versus American. So I would say Ride is a quintessential shoegaze band, but then so is Lush as well. And there's two aspects of it, the sort of
yeah.
more driven guitar and then the more ethereal, but they're both that sort of heavy with the effects. And it's really, really, I'm very fond of shoegaze in small doses. Um, I think, a whole album of it's probably testing the limits there, I think, but it's really nice bits and pieces. So I might dig up another Lush song for you to
Yeah,
enjoy.
I'd
I
welcome
shall
that.
wrap things up.
Okay.
Thanks again for listening to this. Folks out there, tell us what you think of a Lush, of this song, of the album Spooky. Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting music at that time as well. I guess being around then, it really affected me more. So yeah, please drop us a line, tell us what you think. Other Lush songs. There's one, maybe two in particular that I think of that would really kick in. And then there's a later sort of poppier stuff. Not so keen on it myself, but tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Please hit the like button if you like this. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? We really appreciate everybody who supports the channel. So please hop on board. And please display your tickets at all times. That being said, thanks again so much for watching. And we'll see all of you in the next episode of the Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.